Good afternoon, distinguished guests. It is my great pleasure to welcome all the attendees of the William Perry Lecture Series hosted by the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies and sponsored by Pacific Century Institute. It is truly commendable to see the significant development of the William Perry Lecture Series this year, marking the fourth of the series. Because the situation surrounding the Korean Peninsula, including the relationship between the two Koreas, is undergoing dramatic change, the anticipation for this lecture is greater than ever. Our speaker today, Mr. Robert Carlin, served as a senior policy advisor to the special ambassador for talks with North Korea, taking part in the US DPRK negotiations from 1992 to 2000, and was a senior policy advisor at the Korean Peninsula Energy Development Organization, KEDO, from 2002 to 2006. With all this, I believe that Mr. Carlin will provide us with his most prestigious insight in US DPRK negotiations. I wish I could listen to his lecture, but I have to leave after this speak because I have another event. I'm really sorry about this. I would like to express my sincere respect and gratitude to the Pacific Century Institute and the President Spencer Kim, who has been very generous and supportive to Yonsei University over the past 10 or 15 years, I guess, for their continued interest and support that make these meaningful lectures possible. In addition, I would like to extend my profound appreciation to Choi Ah-jin. Where is he? Oh, Choi Ah-jin is right there. Director of Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies, and hope that the Institute develops into a top research institution through valuable academic activities in the field of unification, inter-Korean relationship, and peace in East Asia. Finally, I express my deepest gratitude to Professor Moon Jong-in, who is not here at this moment, and former Defense Secretary William Perry for their great commitment and efforts in developing this lecture series possible. I hope that this lecture will provide an important milestone for peace on the Korean Peninsula at this critical juncture in the path toward North Korea's denuclearization. Thank you much. Thank you very much, and enjoy the lecture. Thank you again.
And welcome to everyone. I'm a professor here in the Graduate School of International Studies. We're not officially on the list of hosting institutions, but on behalf of GSIS, I also want to welcome you. It's great to see such a wonderful crowd. I know many of our students are here, and you're the core audience for Mr. Carlin. But we also have a great representation from the diplomatic community, from the journalist community, and business community. So it's really wonderful to see such a great group here in New Millennium Hall. My job is to briefly introduce Bob and kind of set up his discussion and our format. So in thinking about this opportunity, I was remembering the first time that I met Mr. Carlin. I was based in New York at that time, and actually the very first time we met was an event with a North Korean official, a DPRK official, posted to the UN mission. I actually had an opportunity coming up soon to visit North Korea. And Bob's reputation is hard to describe, what a colossus he is in the world of sort of North Korea watching. So of course I knew who he was, and I figured here's an opportunity, I'll ask for some advice. So I asked if he would go out for breakfast at a diner in Manhattan, and I could get his tips, my chance to, what should I be looking for when I went to North Korea for the first time myself. It's a very memorable breakfast, and he sort of walked me through how to do it. The moment I remember best is he said, "John, look out the window. Do you see any cars on the street? You know, we're in Manhattan. We're on Park Avenue or what it is, the Upper East Side." And I said, no cars. He said, "Does that mean there's no traffic in New York City?" I said, "No." He said, "And yet you're going to hear people saying there's no traffic in Pyongyang. And whatever you see on the street, outside your bus or outside your hotel, remember you're looking at one street. and something else entirely different could be going on in the other streets behind me. So he walked me through a number of these tips that I did my best to use. Ended up making only 4 trips to North Korea myself. I don't know what his total number is. It's in the high dozens. The main lesson I learned is that I was not made for intelligence work and analysis, and that I should stick to being a professor, so I've very happily achieved that goal so far. But I've continued to stay close to Bob and to constantly reach out to read everything he writes, as I know many of you in this room do, and to learn incessantly, really, from his insights. I would describe him as a Sherpa. He's someone who can guide us into the Himalayas of something we study here at Yonsei and at GSIS and at the Institute, international security, diplomacy, international affairs. I think there's no question North Korea is a Mount Everest, if not the Mount Everest. And he studied it since the mid-70s in the intelligence world, but then also in diplomacy in the State Department and in direct negotiation. So Bob can talk about North Korea as a subject, but also as an object. What's happening internally in North Korea, but also how our actions, especially the United States actions, but also South Korea, are affecting it. And so it's a great opportunity for us to have him here. Now I want to warn you, the word on the street is he has a fairly gloomy take on the current situation, so prepare yourselves for that. I've encouraged him not to make this a Halloween talk, but it could be a little dark. He will give his prepared remarks, and then Sung Ji-ae and myself will join him for more of a conversation that will certainly include your questions. And so it'll be a combined format. After his remarks, we'll then have a moderated discussion and Q&A. If the talk is quite Halloween, we'll make sure that the Q&A is Easter. That it will end on a hopeful note. At least I'll try my best to have us end on a hopeful note. So, without further ado, I want to turn the microphone over to the reason we're all here, Bob Carlin. Welcome.
You know, I've never been described as a colossus. Or a Sherpa. Actually, I always thought of myself as a husband. Helping the great, beautiful policy liner in the book. There's always a little tugboat on the side that you don't pay any attention to. That is the reason the great liner doesn't crash into the dock. That's what us in the intelligence community are supposed to be doing. Not being in the limelight, but helping the big guys on the big boat get safely where they want to get. I want to thank the Pacific Century Institute and the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies for supporting and hosting this series, and especially for inviting me here this afternoon. I'm pausing because I want to leave some time for the translators. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, let me start with this couple of sentences. As you well know, the situation on the Korean Peninsula is rapidly deteriorating and could become extremely dangerous within a few months. Once the present structure of agreements and negotiations collapses, there are few, if any, safe exits and no safety net. That sounds very sobering. And it was. And I say was because it is from an October 1998 memo that Professor John Lewis at Stanford wrote to former Secretary Bill Perry, asking him to take charge of a complete policy review on the North Korea issue for the Clinton administration. John Lewis was a wise, experienced figure with boundless energy, and he played a pretty important role behind the scenes, which I'll refer to him several times during this talk, I think. But in October 1998, I was in the State Department. I was advisor to the U.S. negotiator. And I was glad to hear President Kim relate the title, because actually I was never sure if I was the senior advisor to the special negotiator or the special negotiator to the senior advisor. It was never straight. I didn't have business cards, and so now I know. Anyway, in '98, I was the advisor. Professor Lewis and I had known each other for many years. He had frequently, by '98, he had frequently invited North Korean delegations to Stanford for some pretty important offline discussions. We would fly out to the East Coast and have a chance to talk to North Korean officials in a more neutral setting, away from the hurly-burly of the East Coast. And so, and John knew how to do this, not to interfere, to let us talk among ourselves, but to host the event in a way that everyone felt comfortable. Perhaps, well, John was a man of unfailing optimism. And he had the conviction that nothing was impossible. And no matter how depressing a briefing I would give him along the way about how things were going or not going in North Korea, his war cry was always, well, what should we do? It was never impossible for him. It was always the solution. But in October 1998, the situation looked very bad. A few months earlier, the North Koreans had launched a satellite. The 1994 agreed framework was tottering. It looked to be running out of steam. Congress was clamoring for the Clinton administration's scalp. Leaks in the New York Times told of a supposed secret North Korean facility in a mountain somewhere, supposedly containing a nuclear reactor and a reprocessing plant. And by October, for reasons having nothing to do with Korea, impeachment proceedings were getting underway in the House of Representatives. So I was gloomy. I thought we needed a policy review. I called John, and somehow Bill Perry's name came up, and John wrote this exquisite memo to ask Bill to lend his expertise and his gravitas to the process. Now you'll notice that in October 1998, as I detailed how bad things looked, there were several uncomfortable similarities with the situation today. But there were also some key differences. Of course, we didn't know that at the time, but recall in 1998, the North had no nuclear weapons. Its fissile production facilities were all frozen. They were all under constant supervision by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Although the agreed framework was shaky, it had been in existence for 4 years. We had had hundreds of hours of negotiations with the North Koreans, and we had actually achieved a lot. And we had Bill Perry call on for a rigorous, honest, thorough policy review. Today we sit on the top of a live volcano. That is the result of a string of bad decisions by 2 U.S. administrations, 16 years of bad decisions, one Republican and one Democrat. And that simply can't be undone with the wave of a wand or the flick of a wrist. The chickens have come home to roost, and this is a big ugly chicken that has come home And it's going to get, I fear, it's going to get a lot worse. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll discuss that as the afternoon goes on. Bad decisions result in bad consequences. It's easy to say. You don't think very much about it. You say to yourself, well, of course. You've got to understand, in this case, bad decisions are an incredible challenge to the national security of this country, to the United States, to stability in East Asia. Those bad decisions have consequences that are going to echo through the rest of this decade. Decade, century. Sorry. If you're old enough, you're confused. It doesn't make any difference. Anyway, these bad decisions and this rocky road is with us today, and we're not going to get out of it easily. Let me reduce it again to its simplest form. I'm going to do that several times this afternoon because it's too easy to forget the good position we were once in and the horrible position we are in today. In January 2001, at the end of the Clinton administration, North Korea had no nuclear weapons. Zero. None. Today, conservative estimate is it has at least 40. That's an arsenal. 0 and 40. How did that happen? Was it just bad luck? No. 16 years of bad decisions on the part of two administrations. Let me back up for just a minute and note that the speakers before me, the three speakers before me, were very accomplished people. And they each had more authority and more influence on policy than I did in the tugboat. And so I'm honored to be here today. But the fact also is, for better or worse, I had more time than any of them had on target. That target being North Korea. I started working on North Korea in 1974. This is a long time ago. In his book, Mike Chinoy, the book Meltdown, Mike Chinoy called me a rumpled veteran. He called me up before he used it. He said, Bob, I'm going to call you a rumpled veteran. Is that okay? I said, that's nice. I like that. Sounds very good. You know, I'm even more rumpled now. You got to remember in 1974 what the world looked like when I started this. Kim Il-sung was only 62 years old. I'm a lot older than he was then. Kim Jong-il was 32. A lot of you here are not even at that point. Kim Jong-un did not exist. Park Chung-hee was still very much in charge in South Korea. The Chinese were just coming out of the Cultural Revolution. Richard Nixon was up to his ears in impeachment. Again, impeachment. It sounds like a common theme in the U.S. And as far as knowledge of North Korea goes, you've got to remember 1974 was barely 20 years after the armistice was signed. In policy terms, in Washington, D.C., 20 years is nothing. It's living memory for a lot of people in charge. And so, the primary focus of the United States, certainly the intelligence community at that time, was, is there going to be another attack? Most of the resources were devoted to what we call indications in warning, INW. Satellites, all the entire array of sophisticated intelligence gathering, human gathering, open source gathering, everything really was supposed to be focused on that problem. Is there another attack? Nobody was concerned about North Korea as a political or diplomatic issue. No analysts were really concerned or following that. Those were, in some ways, those were simple times, I suppose you would say. Certainly was before cell phones and Facebook, blogs, none of that. We didn't have computers. So what happened? Well, in 1993, let me back up a second. In the late 80s, it became possible for American officials to start to meet with North Koreans. That began really in 1988 and developed a little bit more in '89. Early on, John Lewis invited North Korean officials to Stanford for meetings and invited some of us in Washington out to meet them as well. I remember in particular one meeting, might have been 1990, 91. John had 3 North Koreans, 3 South Koreans, and 2 of us from the State Department. One of them the head of the Korea desk and me. We were there as observers. North and South Koreans were meeting. It's pretty extraordinary to see the 2 Koreas having these meetings in 1989 in the United States. That was maybe July 2nd or July 3rd. On July 4th, we went to Bill Perry's house for 4th of July barbecue. Picture this. 3 North Korean officials at the house of the former Secretary of Defense celebrating 4th of July at a barbecue. It's impossible today. Why should it be impossible today? That shows you the distance we've traveled, for the steps backwards we've taken. Beginning with the agreed framework, the negotiations in the agreed framework in 1993, and then subsequent when we signed it in October '94, the pace of contact with the North Koreans picked up significantly. At that beginning then and up through 2000 or so, I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of negotiations we had with the North Koreans. Some in Pyongyang, a lot in Geneva, some in Berlin, once in Rome, very nice meeting in Rome. Where else did we meet? We didn't meet North Koreans in South Korea. Anyway, we popped up together in many places around the world. Were talks, official talks, unofficial talks, beer, tea in the afternoon. The point is, you have to, if you're going to be serious about diplomacy, you have to meet a lot. And you can't just meet across the table. You have to take the measure of your counterpart. You have to be comfortable. You have to understand them. You have to be able to parse the silences when they're talking to you, when they have a headache. I can remember this very well. When they have a headache, you have to have an aspirin handy to give them. Because the North Koreans didn't have aspirin, you know. And it had to be clear that you were not doing this to butter them up. You were doing this because you were a human being and they were a human being. And you were sorry they had a headache. Well, we had, if I were to just list quickly for you the range of agreements we had, negotiations and agreements we had with them from '93 to 2000, and I think it's Well, you keep count. Agreed framework talks for 93 to 94, we had an agreement. Talks on the light water reactor model that we were supposed to build for the North Koreans. We had an agreement. There was a helicopter incident along the DMZ. We had an agreement. We talked about liaison offices for years, and we had no agreement. It's not that the Americans were not ready to establish a liaison office. In fact, we had people going out there looking at real estate. Not quite the right word. They were looking at someone else's embassy. I think it was East German embassy to move into. And so we were ready to roll. We had people in training. We had the most important thing. We had the bureaucratic approvals for the slots to have somebody move in there. But the North Koreans didn't want to move ahead. We could never figure out why not. And eventually they said, just forget it. We're not going to do it. Okay. An agreement to can the spent fuel at Yongyun, which was very important. Missile talks. We didn't have an agreement on missile talks because the North Koreans realized pretty early on that the U.S. government was not serious. Why was it not serious about missile talks at that time? It's a long, sad story, but the fact is, whenever we met, which was just once a year, they realized they could just tap dance because it didn't matter what they said. I remember one time they said they wanted, if they were going to give up their missiles, they wanted $1 billion. And naturally, our negotiator was knocked back. $1 billion? Later I said to them, pay no attention. They just pulled that figure out of the air. They're not serious. Divide it by 13. He said, why would I divide it by 13? I said, because it's an arbitrary number. It's the same thing their number is. Doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it. But if you're only going to meet once a year, you're not going to make serious progress. And that's what happened. Submarine apology. We spent weeks in New York City, long hours pulling an apology out of the North Koreans for one of their submarines that got beached on South Korea's east coast. Korean War remains an agreement. Food monitoring, progress. The visit by William Perry in 1999. A missile moratorium, there we had progress. U.S. persons held in North Korea. General officers talks. Joint communique in 2000. Preparations for the Secretary of State's visit again in 2000. We were busy the whole time. The point is, once you open the door to serious progress with North Korea, there is much to do. And there is much you can accomplish. But you have to get the process underway. And that's not what we have now. Again, we're not in a good place. If you don't like sitting on a volcano, I'll say, all right, we're on the edge of a cliff. And we don't have a lot of time to back away. But we have to remember that as bad as things are with North Korea at any one time, they can always get worse. The idea that time is on our side and that we can simply wait out the North Koreans has been proven to be false. In fact, I was at one set of talks with the North Koreans during the Obama administration when the so-called strategic patience was the banner for Obama policy towards North Korea. And a senior North Korean official said, go ahead, be as patient as you want. You be patient, and we'll keep working on our nuclear program. And he was right. I mean, the horrible thing about that is he was right. So again, just to make sure the point is clear. In 98 and again in 2000, no North Korean nuclear weapons. No North Korean nuclear weapons. No tests. If they don't test, they can't have a nuclear weapon. There were no tests. Their fissile material production facilities were under constant supervision by the IAEA. You hear people today saying, oh, we need to get the IAEA back in there. Well, they were there. They were there 365 days a year from 1995 to 2000, so 5-6 years. We lost that. We shouldn't have. We did. There are bad consequences from that. In 1998, we had the good fortune to be facing a North Korean leader who we knew was committed to improving relations with the United States as a priority. We knew that. We hadn't met him yet, and that was a problem. There was a gap in our real understanding of how he operated, how he looked in his own country. But we knew from extremely good sources that this was his priority. Now, it's mixed. We have a young leader, but he's not green anymore. He's going into his 9th year. It's longer than 2 U.S. administrations. He's got experience. He's met a lot of leaders. He's met the U.S. president, 3 times. Our leader has a sense of who he is. That's important when you're going to have, if you're facing a crisis. Leaders have got to have a sense of who's on the other side. But we don't really know if he has the same priority that his father had. I've watched him as closely as I can, and I cannot figure out if he shares that vision of a relationship between the United States and North Korea. He might, and if he does, it's lucky for us, and we have to work on that. But he does a lot of things that cause you to question it, and cause you to wonder if he has a different perspective on North Korea's place in Northeast Asia, and whether or not China or the United States is the star to which he should be hitching his wagon. Now, I don't want to paint 93 to 2000 as golden years. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes. We were learning. We had never really dealt with the North Koreans before. We had a lot to learn. And so did they. It took us a while to settle down. It took us a while to realize that the opening statement the other side reads is just something they have to read, because that was clear in the top rule. It's the lowest common denominator. It's filled with bad language. And when the person, I can remember at one point, the North Korean negotiator was reading a really tough statement. He gets to the end, takes his glasses off, puts the statement aside, and says, okay, now let's start to talk. Couldn't have been more clear. Now, sometimes they are angry. Sometimes we do things which sets them off. Same way it happens that they can set us off as well. Almost never were there walkouts. I can only remember 2 times when notebooks were slammed, people stood up and walked out of the room. One time it was an incredible surprise to me in our negotiations. Well, I don't have to pick that sort of language, he said. Boom! The whole delegation was surprised, so they all got up. My problem was I came with 2 notebooks, briefcases, absolutely filled with notebooks. Research for the negotiators I had already. So they walked out, and I had these notebooks. I closing as the North Koreans were looking at me, hoping I would leave one by mistake. I didn't. I was as graceful as I could be, but The second time it happened was that afternoon when we were having Zoom talks, and at some point the North Korean negotiator said, well, I don't have to take this, slam this notebook and walk out of the room. And it was so clear he was only doing it as balance, so that he could say, well, I did it too, you know. And then we got together right away. So it's a question of playbooks. Each side had a playbook, each side had an audience in the capital that had to impress or soothe. It got to the point where we weren't arguing about extraneous things anymore. We were concentrated on substance and sequence and chronology and vocabulary, which, for example, the North Koreans would sometimes say after we had reached an agreement, well, we need to change this word. And the American side would say, whoa, we agreed already on this vocabulary. Why are you changing the word? And they would say, don't worry. We'll give you a word that means the same thing. But if you use this word that you want, it's going to cause problems in Pyongyang. And we're going to have to fight it. So change the word to what we want, to what we recommend. It's the same thing that you want, but we'll get it through in Pyongyang. And that's what worked. In other words, the two sides started working for each other because they understood that the agreements that they were reaching were in the interest of both sides. Today, we don't know. Bad decisions. I made a list of them. It's extremely long, 16 years. But bad decisions are not just mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. There are missteps you make along the way for bureaucratic reasons, but you recover quickly from those. Bad decisions are those things which have bad consequences, which have long-term consequences, which you don't just pop up again after you've done it. The biggest, baddest bad decision was in October 2002 when the Bush administration destroyed the agreed framework. There was no recovery from that. The North Koreans learned a lesson that we have not managed to get them to unlearn, which is no matter what agreement they reach with the United States, no matter how long it stays in existence and there's progress on it, it can disappear in the blink of an eye when a new administration comes in. It's the worst possible lesson for them to have learned. And for 16 years, we did nothing to convince them otherwise. In 2008, there's what I call a PBD, which is a petite bad decision. What is that? Well, in January 2008, the New York Philharmonic was invited to Pyongyang to perform, perform a North Korean audience. It was clear to me that this was something that Kim Jong-il was very much focused on. Anything the orchestra wanted, it got. It wanted a new concert hall. And the North Koreans put one together in an incredible amount of time with the acoustics that the orchestra approved. The orchestra wanted exotic foods because they're artists and they need exotic things to eat. And by golly, they had it. No complaints. The orchestra said, we're going to have the American flag on the stage with your flag, and we're going to have to play our national anthem. And the North Koreans said, oh good, fine, that's a good idea, let's do that. No problems, no problems. Condi Rice, who was the Secretary of State, was an accomplished pianist. She could have gone with the orchestra, at least to sit in the audience. Even more imaginative would have been for her to go up on stage and play a piece with the orchestra. Right? That would have so altered the chemistry in the relationship. There's no question in my mind. She didn't do it. She couldn't do it, probably because of internal politics in the administration. Anyway, it was an enormous opportunity missed. Just one or two more. In 2009, Bill Clinton, then former president, went to Pyongyang to rescue two journalists who made a silly mistake and got themselves seized by the North Koreans. A Clinton visit to North Korea was a tremendous opportunity to sit and talk to Kim Jong-il. And as it turned out, Kim Jong-il desperately, in my view, wanted to regain some traction with the Americans. He had had a stroke the year before. He was still a very sick man. Everybody in the upper limits of North Korea at that point knew he was mortal. His son was being groomed, and he absolutely needed a stable, secure, external environment. So he wanted to improve things with the Americans. And so he made an effort to engage nuclear weapons. They tested twice. They launched countless missiles. 2017, change of administrations. They launched 3 ICBMs. But beginning in July 2017, Kim Jong-un began to signal very clearly that he was going to pivot. He was going to pivot away from his emphasis on the military and start emphasizing the economy. And that's what he did in early 2018. We got Singapore in 2018, a meeting between President Trump and Chairman Kim. A lot of criticism in Washington. There shouldn't have been. It was not a bad agreement. In fact, after 16 years wandering in the desert, it was the first sign that we might actually begin to get back on track. We were behind because they had 30 nuclear weapons and 6 tests, but at least we could start to engage and maybe get them to cap the program, which is better than money. Unfortunately, this quickly ran out of steam. The momentum that you need to generate early on in the process wasn't there. A lot of that is the fault of the North Koreans. We barely had any engagement with them. Even though the president met with Kim 3 times at lower levels, there's almost nothing. And you can't have diplomacy if you don't sit down and talk. At the end of February this year, the president and Kim met in Hanoi. It was like a plane crash. And frequently, when investigators look at plane crashes, there's not one single decision that the pilot makes that takes the plane down. It's a cascade of bad decisions, each one building on the next. As far as I could tell, that's what happened in Hanoi. A series of things that went wrong. Nobody was able to step in the middle and reverse it, and so it blew up. I think Kim Jong-un was tremendously insulted and upset by the outcome. And in April, he made a major policy speech in which, among other things, he announced that the Americans had until the end of the year to change the basic principles of their approach to North Korea. Well, that was in April. This is November. Well, let me give you the number. 49. 49 days left. 7 weeks left. You know how hard it is to pull together a major diplomatic initiative in 7 weeks? Do you know how hard it is when the president is moving into impeachment? When Washington is the most poisonous atmosphere, so that no matter what the president proposes, it will be torn to shreds. That's my concern. My concern is not necessarily North Korean decisions, although there are some real problems there. It's not American policy at the moment. The American team in the State Department is the best I have ever seen. Steve Biegun is superb in terms of his strategic vision, his ability to work the Washington community, his relationship with other people in the department. But the North Koreans won't engage him. The North Koreans won't engage him. There's nothing we can do. We run out Halloween. If we run out of time, and the North Koreans pull the trigger, and Kim Jong-un gives a New Year's speech in which he announces a number of what will be to us extremely negative measures, I cannot see us responding in anything other than a very stern, escalatory way. What could he do? Well, the least he could do, for example, is to start his plutonium production reactors in Yonsei. That would not be sort of a direct challenge to the United States, but if they start producing plutonium again, their nuclear weapons program suddenly becomes that much more threatening. The more plutonium they have, the worse it is for us. A lot of people talk about a missile test. Okay. He could launch another ICBM. If he launches it straight up and it comes down, people will say he's violating what he promised to President Trump. You know, more important than that, how am I doing on time? Okay. It's not the promise he gave to President Trump. Kim announced the end of testing, not a moratorium, not suspension, the end of testing at a party plenum in April. In other words, for internal purposes, he was saying, we have finished the program, and I am now going to shift all attention to the economy. So this is a promise he made to his own people in a party plenum. Subsequently, in Singapore, he repeated it to the president. If he launches a missile now, what he is telling his own people is, oh, forget that. Actually, I'm not going to devote all the resources to the economy. That has costs for him. Now, he's not going to be impeached, but it has costs for him, and he knows it. He has to have weighed that. And if he's weighed that and made that decision, we should all be worried about what it implies for his future policies. If instead of launching the missile straight up, they launch it at range, I think there's going to be a ferocious American response. I don't think people understand the chemistry in the United States that will take hold when it's clear to people that they themselves are targeted by North Korean missiles. It has nothing to do with whether or not they'll use them. Of course they won't use them under normal circumstances. But the newspapers will get hysterical. Congress will get hysterical. The response is going to be not what the North Koreans expect. And my concern is the North Koreans are going to miscalculate. I won't say Kim will make bad decisions because you can't say he makes bad decisions. But I can't say someone is going to miscalculate in Pyongyang as they follow through on their end-of-year deadline. And the dynamic that is going to develop between the United States and North Korea is not going to be one that's easily handled because we have no platform. In 1998, we had a platform. We had an agreement. We had all those things working in our favor. We have none of them today. You want Easter? I don't know how to do that. I don't do Easter. Okay, Easter. Steve Biegun. Steve Biegun is going to be has been nominated to be Deputy Secretary of State. He's going to go into his hearings sometime this month, apparently. We'll be able to have some sense of whether or not things are as imbalanced as I'm afraid they are in Washington by how those hearings go, by how the Senate questions him, by what he says in his statement, which I assure you will be very carefully crafted to send a message to Pyongyang, and how the North Koreans respond. At this moment, the North Koreans have not created for themselves a fire escape from Kim Jong-un's year-end deadline. Normally, what you see when they make any sort of a deadline situation is they draw on the cliff face a door, like in a cartoon, and then when they want to, they open it up and walk away from their ultimatum. That, you can't find that now. They haven't done that. They're making it seem as if there's no way out. Either Americans do this, or we're going to do this. Okay, in 7 weeks, we might have a hard time changing our policy. Kim will not have that hard a time changing his. So there's hope. Day by day, we keep watching to see if they understand that what the Americans need is more time. Diplomacy requires time and space. We don't have either one of those right now. That's what we need. We need to get past December 31st. We need the North Koreans to settle down, engage seriously in a sustained way with this American team, and I think then we might be able to get some traction. That's Easter. That's the best thing. Okay, so I thank you for your attention. I hope we get some good conversation, question and answer. Yeah.